Hello and welcome to week 2, day 3. Today we are getting into the interpersonal cluster. Diving in a little bit deeper, I'm going to focus on the areas that I like to work on the most for myself. Again, same with yesterday's video. If you find this information useful and you'd like me to do an even deeper dive going into every topic that's covered, please let me know. I'd be happy to do so, maybe after I take my SHRM test when I have a little bit more time. But for now, I'm just going to focus on the areas that I would like to for my personal studying. Without further ado, let's get into it. So we're going to start with negotiation, tactics, strategies, and styles. So from the interpersonal cluster, specifically under relationship management, these are tools HR professionals use to resolve conflict, influence decisions, and build alignment. So first is principled bargaining. So that is a negotiation method that focuses on objective standards and mutual interests rather than pressure or positional arguments. So the key features of that, they focus on issues, not personalities. They use facts, fairness, and shared values, and aim for win-win outcomes. So an example is negotiating a flexible work policy based on benchmark data and productivity studies rather than emotional appeals. So that is principled bargaining. 2 is auction. So auction is a negotiation strategy where multiple parties bid against each other, typically used in procurement or competitive offers. So that involves competitive bidding and can drive prices down or up. And it's not relationship focused, it's often transactional. So for example, an HR is managing an RFP for new healthcare providers and the vendors need to submit competing proposals. So that can either drive the prices up or down depending on, how those proposals go. Then we have interest-based bargaining, or IBB. This is a collaborative approach that looks for solutions based on shared interests and not fixed positions. So key features of that is focusing on the why behind the demand and not just the demand itself. It is a technique that encourages open dialogue and creative problem solving, and it builds trust and often leads to long-term solutions. So for example, during a union negotiation, HR works with reps to find common goals, for example, safety and retention, rather than just debating wages. Then we have position-based bargaining. This is traditional negotiation where each side takes a firm stance and makes concessions to reach a compromise. So key features, each party starts with a position. For example, salary demand, often leads to haggling or splitting the difference and can damage relationships over time. So for example, an employee demands a 15% raise, HR offers 5%, and they settle at 10%, without discussing underlying performance or market data. So a tip for the SHRM-CP test, when faced with this scenario question, SHRM tends to favor interest-based and principled approaches, strategies that protect relationships and align with organizational goals, and avoidance of positional bargaining unless there's no alternative. Okay, so let's get into some of the global mindset areas. So there are different models: Hall, Hofstede, Schein, and Trompenaars. Honestly, I'm sorry, I don't know how to pronounce them, but we're moving forward. So the focus of Hall is communication. Key concepts is high context versus low context cultures. So for example, in practice, in high context, for example, Japan, indirect communication is the norm. In low context countries like the US, clarity and explicit words matter more. So for Hofstede, the focus is cultural dimensions. This includes power distance, individualism versus collectivism, uncertainty avoidance, masculinity versus femininity, and long-term orientation. So in high power distance cultures, hierarchy is expected. In low power distance cultures, you're going to see flatter organizations be the norm. Then we have shine, or shine, I don't know, sorry. And this focuses on organizational culture. So there are 3 levels: artifacts, espoused values, and underlying assumptions. So for an example, a company that values innovation, an espoused value, might discourage failure, which is the underlying assumption, and this mismatch matters. Then we have Trump and R's, again, pronunciation, forgive me. The focus on this one is cultural dimensions for business. This includes, This includes universalism versus particularism, achievement versus ascription. So in universalist cultures, rules apply to all. In particularist cultures, exceptions based on relationships are expected. Why does SHRM care? These models help HR practitioners operate across cultures by anticipating different behaviors and values. Especially helpful in global companies, mergers, and remote teams because you're going to see different cultures collide. We already talked about ERGs, or employee resource groups, in yesterday's video from the leadership group, but it can kind of tie into the global mindset as well. So the purpose is to foster belonging across cultural identities. For example, international employees, first-generation Americans, etc. And the global value, it helps global organizations localize their inclusion efforts while aligning with enterprise values. Then we have reverse mentorship. This is a junior or culturally different employee mentoring a senior leader, usually to provide insight into new generational, cultural, or tech-related perspectives. It works because it promotes inclusion, it flattens hierarchy, and it expands cultural awareness. So for example, a Gen Z Latina engineer mentors the CIO on inclusive design, social issues, and regional cultural differences. So the SHRM-aligned takeaway here is that this is a strategic inclusion tool, not just a DEI feel-good initiative. Last but not least, best practices for global workforce inclusion is to translate policies and procedures, because it ensures compliance, clarity, and inclusivity across regions. And also account for time zones. This promotes equity in global collaboration and avoids marginalizing remote or international teams. For example, if your headquarters is in New York and you host a team meeting at 4 p.m. Eastern, it's 3 a.m. in India. SHRM test questions may ask which meeting time best supports inclusion. Well, there you have it. That is the interpersonal cluster, what we focused on during this video. Tomorrow, we're going to be getting into the business cluster to wrap up the content portion of this week before we get into our recap. Make sure you're still doing your assignments throughout the week, and I will catch up with you tomorrow. Bye!